The story takes place in the future, a few years after the last rainfall. Kendal, a teenage orphan, struggles to find water for herself and her friend, Dean. They live in a hidden attic on the Wallace farm, constantly on guard. Kendal always carries a weapon and never approaches a location without first checking through her scope. Both their home and the surrounding farms are completely abandoned, making survival increasingly difficult. Still, every day, Kendal sets aside a small portion of water in a jar and leaves it at the nearest neighbor's front door. One morning, she wakes up startled by the sound of strangers downstairs. Dean is also on high alert, and they both prepare for the worst. The voices complain that there's no water to steal, and one of them suggests checking the attic. Fortunately, the others dismiss the idea and leave. Through her scope, Kendal makes sure the intruders are far away before heading out for her daily water collection. While scavenging at a nearby farm, she is startled when someone suddenly touches her hand. Reacting instantly, she draws her weapon, but upon seeing the frail girl begging for water, she softens and hands her an almost full jar. The girl, Elizabeth, is on her way to her sister's house across the valley, where things are not going well. Their conversation is interrupted by gunfire. Kendal quickly uses her scope and sees two people being executed by masked individuals. Elizabeth warns her not to stay in one place for too long. People like that will eventually find her. Even if she manages to avoid them, the well will eventually run dry. Without responding, Kendal hands Elizabeth a knife and wishes her luck. Later, she meets her childhood friend, Gabriel. They remember when the valley was still green. Gabriel asks about Dean's health, but Kendal avoids the topic and pushes him away when he tries to kiss her. Gabriel mentions a potential news source, so Kendal follows him to check it out. When they arrive, they see a group of watchers gathered, soon realizing why. A water truck is arriving. That night, Kendal hears a girl calling for help over the radio. She says she is alone at Doe Farm, and a masked man is outside. Dean is surprised to see Kendal gearing up to leave. She explains the situation, determined to help, but Dean warns her against it. When Kendal arrives at the farm, she realizes it's a trap. A man named Carson controls the region's water supply and forces the girl to send distress calls to lure people in. Most of the area's wells have dried up, and anyone still alive must be stealing from him. When the girl begs for her family's release, Carson shoots one of them to prove he is serious. Knowing she has nothing to lose, she grabs the radio and shouts a warning, telling others not to come. Carson's daughter, Brooke, is the one tasked with punishing her. Once Carson's group leaves, Kendal sneaks into the house and finds the horrifying aftermath. The next day, Kendal takes the water jar to her neighbor, revealing he is just a child named Albie. She invites him to live with her and Dean. Besides still having water, she and Dean have found a Cessna plane in good condition. Once they get the missing part, they can escape the valley. However, Albie refuses. He prefers to stay alone, believing his home is safe because his well is already dry. Kendal doesn't insist and continues scavenging. At an abandoned orphanage, she gets emotional seeing records of her and Dean's names on the same page. It's also revealed that Dean had a sister, Pia, who passed away. When she returns home, she delivers bad news. The well is drying up. Dean insists she should leave without him. Alone, she could make it on foot, but he wouldn't be able to walk all the way to his uncle's house outside the valley. Kendal refuses to even consider it, vowing never to leave him behind. Later, they hear someone from Birch Farm calling Carson for help again. Dean pleads with her not to go, worried about her safety. But Kendal has her reasons. She wants to see if aligning with Carson, at least temporarily, might be a good idea. On the way to Birch Farm, she finds Elizabeth's lifeless body lying on the ground. The jar she gave her is empty, abandoned just a few meters away. Heartbroken, Kendal retrieves her knife and continues on. At Birch Farm, she finds Gabriel digging a grave for one of his relatives. His entire family is there. A woman named Grace speaks to Kendal, saying she's tired of living in fear. Their well has dried up, and many family members are elderly or sick. Carson has resources, but he only shares them with those loyal to him. Recently, he has even started distributing flyers, inviting people to take refuge in his hideout. Gabriel urges Kendal to join them. Carson could help Dean. Kendal doesn't judge their decision, but simply replies that she has other options. Grace is amazed that Kendal still has faith and offers her what little water they have left. As she fills her canteen, Carson arrives with Brooke and his usual masked enforcers. The agreement for their meeting is simple. Any refugees must leave their weapons visible as a sign of goodwill. Kendal, still hidden inside the house, grips her rifle tightly and watches through the window. Carson begins with a solemn prayer. Then, without hesitation, he opens fire. Gabriel is the only one spared, as he is still young and could be useful. Carson asks if anyone else is hiding on the farm, making it clear that lies will not be forgiven. After a moment of hesitation, Gabriel says there is one more person. Kendal tries to hide as Carson orders his masked men to use a heat sensor to locate her. As the masked men fill the house with gas, Kendal covers her face with her clothes. To her surprise, Gabriel has actually ratted out someone else who is also hiding. When Carson asks again if there's anyone left, Gabriel assures him there isn't. Seizing her chance, Kendal bolts. But as she runs, she collides with one of the masked men who is standing guard. She pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. This time it works. She takes her axe and flees, stopping at Albie's door to rest. By now, the well has completely dried up, but she lies to Dean, saying the pump is just running slow. Dean, however, has his own theory. Carson is draining the region's aquifer, stealing water from everyone until he has complete control over the valley. This realization only strengthens their determination to fix the plane and escape. The next day, Dean visits his sister Pia's grave to say goodbye. He tells Kendal that when his time comes, he wants to be cremated. After returning home, Kendal is about to leave when she notices one of Carson's men standing a few meters away with his back turned. She quickly hides but accidentally makes a noise, drawing his attention. Worse, the candy she made for Dean is out in the open. As she shifts positions to grab the jar, she sees that Carson's crew is already near the door. One of them, dressed as a priest, calls out, referring to her as the murderer who left one of their men in the desert without even the dignity of a burial. Kendal keeps switching hiding spots as they enter, using their heat-detecting devices to search for her. She quietly climbs up to the attic, where Dean is already wrapped in aluminum foil to fool the detectors. The voices downstairs grow closer, and suddenly, the devices start beeping, signaling that they have found something. A single gunshot echoes. Then silence. Kendal and Dean hold their breath, realizing that no one has entered yet. Peeking through a hole, she watches, waiting for their next move. Kendal watches as one of the masked men explains to Carson that the heat signature was a false positive caused by the sun beating down on one spot all day. They decide to leave, but Carson, not taking any chances, orders them to fill the attic with gas. Kendal and Dean are prepared for this and put on their masks. Carson's men post one of their flyers on the door before leaving. After they're gone, Kendal notices Dean isn't well. Concerned for her friend's health, she decides it's time to fix the plane. She plans to steal a part from one of Carson's cars, but the entrance to his refuge is always guarded. Right now, one of the masked men is camouflaged in a pile of sand right behind her. Kendal doesn't notice until he quietly rises and grabs her by the hair. She kicks his foot to free herself and fires 2 shots before escaping to Albie's house. She finds Albie under a car and tells him her plan, but he's upset, saying her visits always bring Carson's men to his house. Kendal promises she'll come back for him when she leaves with Dean. Albie, however, scoffs, saying promises mean nothing. The next day, 3 nomads approach in search of water. When she steps outside, armed, the nomads panic. They swear they come in peace. Their farm was destroyed by Carson, and only the 3 of them survived, knowing he wouldn't shelter weak people. Their story matches their appearance, but Kendal doesn't trust anyone. She makes them stand at a distance and tosses them a canteen, making it clear they must leave. After drinking, one of them asks how many people are in her group. She lies, saying she's alone. The woman invites her to join them, but Kendal declines and repeats that they need to go. Later, Dean realizes she's lying about the well. Kendal finally confesses. They have only a week's worth of water left. They must find the missing plane part before then, but the only place left to search is Carson's refuge, and she doesn't know how to get in unnoticed. That's when Dean has an idea. In a world without water, the most terrifying thing is fire. Using a slingshot, Kendal starts a small fire, creating a distraction. As Carson's men rush to put out the flames, she sneaks in, steals the part from a parked jeep, and escapes. On the way back, she compares its size to Dean's drawing and smiles. It's a perfect match. At home, she excitedly shares the news and begins preparing for the trip. She hands Dean a canteen, telling him to drink as much as he wants. But as soon as she steps outside to fill another jar, the 3 nomads ambush her. They tie her up and gag her, gulping down her water. Realizing there isn't enough for one more person, they decide to kill her. Before they can, gunshots ring out. Dean has shot the woman and one of the men. The last nomad knocks Dean down, but is quickly taken out as well. However, the gunfire alerts Carson. Kendal sees him and his men approaching fast. Dean only has time to help her hide inside a car before finding himself surrounded. When Carson asks about the shots, Dean claims it was a fight over the last of the water, since the well just dried up. Inside the car, Kendal struggles to free herself. Dean stalls Carson, but when he sees Brooke and another masked man heading to the barn, he opens fire. He manages to take down one masked man and wound another before he is executed. Kendal watches from the car, stifling her sobs. The injured henchman, now useless to Carson, is executed by the priest. The group then ransacks the house, destroying everything they don't take. Before leaving, Carson and Brooke declare that they will move on to the next farms, while the priest marks this one as theirs. Kendal waits in silence until they are gone, then escapes through the back of the barn. Nearly fainting from the scorching sun, she makes her way to Birch Farm. She digs through the sand over the fresh graves until she finds a sword. The priest, standing guard at the house, is her first target. He doesn't even have time to react before she takes him down. She grabs his ammunition and enters the house, shooting 2 masked men coming down the stairs. Removing their masks, she's shaken to see that one of them is Gabriel. Returning home, Kendal honors Dean's last wish, placing his body inside the house before setting it on fire. The next morning, she fits the stolen part into the plane's engine and goes to fetch Albie as promised. However, when she sees Carson's flyer on his door, she realizes he has been kidnapped. Running to Carson's refuge, she spots Albie on the other side of the fence, guarded by Brooke. Kendal throws her sword and gun over the fence before diving into a puddle of mud, emerging on the other side. Moving cautiously toward the sheds, she is soon surrounded. Without hesitation, she opens fire, taking down Carson's men one by one. When Carson and Brooke appear, Kendal shoots Carson in the arm and Brooke in the shoulder, only to realize she's out of bullets. Then, he lunges at Kendal with a machete. Kendal quickly gains the upper hand and kills him. Brooke, undeterred, picks up the machete and challenges Kendal. Albie watches from a corner as the 2 women fight. Unlike her father, Brooke is much more agile. She slams Kendal's head against a wall several times and locks her in a chokehold. Kendal, on the verge of suffocation, headbutts Brooke and breaks free. She strikes Brooke's wounded shoulder, causing her to drop the machete. She desperately reaches for an axe, but she has no strength left to use it. With one final strike, Kendal finishes Brooke off. At last, she and Albie walk toward the plane. The boy asks if they should look for Dean. Kendal simply responds, Dean will be left behind. Then, they start the plane, finally leaving that place behind. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.
देखो वही देख रहा है बेटा भी चलाएं वो आसपास
We better stall software update.
हाँ
Here RSK.
आरकेडी की
RKG.
बोला कैंपर था बच्चा
वो बाहर निकले तो उनको लगा कि एम आ जाएगा ना मेरे पे। वो बड़े नूबड़ा समझा हुआ था। मैंने नूबड़ा किया ना, वो देखिए मैं जाके बिल्कुल यूं निकला जैसे कि मैं नूबड़ा होता हूँ। वो है ना लगता है मैं नूबड़ा हूँ। एक दो
Double kill.
रिवाइव हो जाता है। मुझे पता था कि तब मुझे पता कि आएगा क्लॉक टावर पे।
बिल्कुल बड़े दिल पता नहीं था
अभी कैंपर था
तेरी तरह
Triple
डाटा
kill.
हद दूसरा
मैं खुद कैंपिंग कर रहा था जानबूझ के। देखो इधर ही आने
तेरे पता है 3 सीजन वाले हैं
मैं लॉबी में देखा था।
अब ले तो कर वो पर के ऑन मार और नहीं फिर देर हो जाएगी, मैंने खाना फिर यार नहीं होती।
बेटी माँ की नमाज पढ़ के पढ़ना ना पड़ी लगी।
अभी नहीं
हाँ ले आज के लेना।
बात कर दूं, थोड़ी जल्दी छुट्टी ले आऊंगा।
Quadra kill.